خبراء الطاقة والمختصين، السادة الحضور الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يسعدني أن أكون في هذا المنتدى الكبير الذي يتناول الطاقة وتكنولوجيا تطويرها وإنتاجها، لأسلط الضوء على دور وزارة المواد المائية التي هي عضو في المجلس الوزاري للطاقة، وتسهم إسهاما أساسيا في إنتاج تلك الطاقة بواسطة السدود الكبيرة والمنشآت ومنشآت السيطرة الرئيسية. الماء مورد مهم تتوقف عليه الحياة في هذا الكوكب، ويشكل أهم عناصر البيئة ويلعب دورا أساسيا بكافة جوانبها. عليه فإن الاهتمام بالموارد المائية في العراق يعتبر أمرا حيويا لتغطية احتياجات الإنسانية من مياه الشرب والاستخدامات المدنية، وتأمين متطلبات البيئة والزراعة وتوليد الكهرباء والاحتياجات الصناعية، إضافة إلى إنعاش الأهواء. إن العراق يتشارك في الأنهار والموارد المائية مع الدول المجاورة، فنهر الفرات يأخذ حوالي 88% من احتياجاته المائية من تركيا، و9% من سوريا، وحوالي 3% من العراق. أما نهر دجلة يأخذ 47% من احتياجاته من تركيا، و13% من إيران، وحوالي 40% من داخل العراق. إن الحاجة إلى الموارد المائية في العراق متزايد مستمر نتيجة النمو السكاني والتطور الاقتصادي، يقابله تناقص في هذه الموارد الحيوية وتردي نوعيته نتيجة استمرار دول الجوار في أعالي حوضي دجلة والفرات لإنشاء وتطوير المشاريع التخزينية والإروائية بهدف تحقيق أكبر استغلال للمياه وتحويل قسم منها إلى أحواض أخرى، إضافة إلى ظاهرة التغير المناخي التي أثرت بشكل واضح على المنطقة والعراق، حيث يلاحظ منذ بدايات القرن الحالي تعرض منطقة الشرق الأوسط بشكل عام والعراق بشكل خاص إلى سنوات جفاف متعاقبة، كما حصل في فترات 1999 إلى 2001 و2008 إلى 2009 و2014 إلى 15، يضاف إلى تعاقب نقصان الإيرادات لسنتين 2017 و2018. إن العقد الأخير من السنوات كان أقل فترة في تسجيل الإيرادات المائية، حيث بلغت السنوات الشحيحة منها 50%، وهذا ما يؤشر الخطر الكبير للسببين المذكورين أعلى فيما يخص نقص الإيرادات المائية في حوضي دجلة. لذا فإن زيادة الوعي بهذا الخطر على جميع المستويات وتقنين وترشيد استخدامات المياه مهم جدا للمحافظة على هذه الثروة الحيوية لنا ولأجيالنا القادمة، ومن خلال وضع القوانين والتشريعات الداخلية التي تحد من هدر المياه ومحاسبة المتجاوزين عنه إلى تهديد خطير، مما يبرز أهمية إيجاد حلول سريعة وناجحة وعلى المستويين الخارجي والداخلي الخطة الاستثمارية لتنفيذ مخرجاتها على مدى 20 سنة القادمة، وبالغة 105 مليار دولار. الجزء الأكبر منها مخصص لقطاع المواد المائية والزراعة بمقدار 40 مليار، وقطاع البلديات بمقدار 48 مليار دولار. حددت تلك الدراسة العلاقة ما بين الماء والغذاء والطاقة والبيئة في العراق، وركزت على الأمور المهمة الآتية: أولا، تأهيل البنى التحتية لنظام الري، تأهيل البنى التحتية للسيطرة على الفيضان، تأهيل نظام البذل، إدارة الأهوار، إدارة المياه، استخدام المياه وترشيد استخداماتها من حيث إمدادات المياه للأغراض البلدية والصناعية، إمدادات المياه البلدية، معالجة المياه العادمة الناتجة من البلديات، إمدادات المياه لقطاع الصناعة والنفط والكهرباء، تقليل فواقد التبخر، المياه المخصصة للثروة الحيوانية والأسماك، المياه المخصصة للزراعة، إدارة الجفاف، إدارة المياه على المستوى الحقل الواحد. على سبيل المثال، فإن إمدادات المياه لقطاع الصناعة والنفط والكهرباء في العراق حاليا تحتاج مياه كميتها بحدود 650 مليون متر مكعب، بينما في عام 2035 متوقع أن يبلغ الاحتياج لهذا القطاع كمية تعادل 2.8 مليار متر مكعب، بزيادة نسبتها 300%. وقد تم إعداد خطط يتطلب تنفيذها لتلبية هذه الزيادة في الاحتياج المتوقع من خلال تنفيذ الخطط التي تم ذكرها في الدراسة الاستراتيجية المنوه عليها. إن الطاقة التصميمية لتوليد الكهرباء من السدود تبلغ حاليا 2100 ميجا وات، وخلال هذا العام تم توليد ما يقارب 1350 ميجا وات، وهو أعلى توليد مقارنة بالسنوات الماضية. ووفقا للخطة الاستراتيجية للمواد المائية والأراضي في العراق، فإن هناك 1800 ميجا وات ممكن إضافتها من سدود مخطط لإنشائها خلال 15 سنة القادمة. هذه الطاقة وإن كانت تشكل نسبة قليلة من إنتاج الطاقة الكهربائية في العراق، إلا أنها كانت عاملا رئيسيا في استقرار الكهرباء خلال أشهر الصيف الماضي، من خلال زيادة الطاقة التوليدية إلى أعلى ما يمكن، وهذا طبعا بفضل كمية الخزين المائي العالية في سدودنا لهذه السنة. كما تقوم الوزارة بإجراء دراسات لغرض تنفيذ مشروع استخدام الألواح الشمسية في تغطية المسطحات المائية والقنوات المائية لغرض إنتاج الطاقة الكهربائية. نتيجة لورود كميات مياه كبيرة فيضانية من الأمطار المتساقطة داخل وخارج العراق في حوضي دجلة والفرات في هذه السنة، قامت وزارة الموارد المائية باتخاذ الإجراءات اللازمة للسيطرة على تلك الإيرادات العالية من خلال خزن القسم الأكبر منها في منظومة سدودنا، وتسليك المتبقي بتصاريف مسيطر عليها في الأنهر حتى لا تتسبب بالأضرار للمواطنين والمنشآت. وقد بلغ الخزين المائي الأقصى لهذه السنة حوالي 59 مليار أو أكثر من 59 مليار متر مكعب، وهو الأعلى مقارنة ب20 سنة الماضية، وهو يكفي لسنتين متعاقبتين، علما أنه تم استهداف زراعة صيفية عالية مقارنة بالسنوات السابقة، خصوصا لمحصول الشلل هذا العام الذي وصلت المساحة الزراعية له حوالي 650 ألف دونم، بزيادة مقدارها 50% عن أعلى خطة معتمدة في السنوات الماضية. في ختام كلمتي أقدم شكري للقائمين على هذا المنتدى لإتاحة الفرصة لنا تقديم رؤية ونشاط وزارتنا في هذا المجال الحيوي، المتمنين للجميع دوام التقدم والازدهار، والشكر جزيل للحضور. شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا جزيلا لمعالي جمال العادلي وزير الموارد المائية. I would like to invite Mr. John Rice, Chairman of GE Gas and Power, to deliver his speech.
رئيس شركة الطاقة GE بإلقاء كلمته. سيدنا نائب رئيس الدولة للطاقة، الحضور الكرام، السلام عليكم. إنه من المشرف أنه من الأمر المشرف لي أن أتي مرة أخرى للعراق في المنتدى الخامس، وأن الموضوع الذي يخص المنتدى هو الأفضل في هذه الأيام. بالنسبة لي الوقت الذي قضيناه في العراق يعود إلى أكثر من 50 عاما، لهذا نفهم الأمس واليوم والغد. نحن قدمنا احتياجات للبناء الشخصي، بناء تحتية لحوالي 25 عاما، وبالنسبة للمدة التي ذكرتها كانت وما تزال مهمة جدا. بالنسبة للأوقات الصعبة في هذه البلاد وخلال المنطقة، أتينا وبقينا ونحن ملتزمون لمواجهة المستقبل معا. ومن هذا المكان الآن مسؤولة عن 55، شركة الطاقة جي مسؤولة عن 55 من الطاقة، و90% من تقنية البلد، ومدى واسع من العناية الطبية. نحن فقط الآن في مرحلة البداية، لأننا نرى المستقبل ونراه واعدا كما ترونه أنتم، لكن لكي نقوم بأداء عملنا جيدا يجب أن يكون لدينا مجاميع عمل محلية. لدينا 90% من عمالنا هم وموظفينا هم هم محليون يقومون بتقديم المعلومات وتدريب الموظفين، ونحن نقوم بتدريب موظفينا بأنفسنا، وقمنا بتدريب ما يقارب من 800 شخص على مجال الطاقة. نحن نفهم أن تنمية الرصيد البشري هو شيء مهم جدا، ونحن معا يجب أن نكون معا أفضل لنواجه تحديات الغد. ونحن نعمل أيضا في العراق بلا كلل لتوفير المواد التي يحتاجها العراق من التمويل، وحوالي $2 مليار للمشاريع التي تحتاجها العراق في الطاقة. وقد يصبح هذا القطاع أيضا كما تودون أن يكون. وبصراحة أنه من الجيد جدا أن نعود إلى هنا لنرى التقدم الذي يواجهه الذي موجود هنا في البلد. كان البلد ما بين 4 إلى 5 جيجا وات من توفير الطاقة، لكن هذا العام كان هناك إنتاج الطاقة ما يعادل 19 جيجا وات، ولهذا نود أن نقدم التبريك والتهاني على هذا الرقم. ويمكننا إضافة أيضا 13 جيجا وات خلال السنوات القادمة. 3 جيجا وات سنكون نحن أيضا مسؤولين عنها خلال العام القادم. لكن أود أن أوضح نقطة مهمة، أن هذه ليست خطتنا. نحن ما نفعله هو لدعم ما تقومون به بخطتكم. عملنا هو أن ندعم ما تقدمونه من خطط التنمية الخاصة بكم. حددنا حوالي 16 من المواقع التي يمكن تطويرها، و وأيضا يمكننا إضافة 3.3 من الجيجا وات من الطاقة الكهربائية.
ونحن نستمر بالعمل من أجل أن نقوم بتطوير المحطات الثانوية وشبكات التوزيع من أجل ضمان أن كل كيلووات يتم إنتاجه من الطاقة الكهربائية يتم استهلاكه بأفضل صورة ممكنة. نحن نعتقد بأن هذا الجهد يمكن أن يغطي ثلث البلد من حاجة الكهرباء، والأكثر أهمية هذا العمل سوف يوفر لكم كهرباء مستدامة إلى الأماكن التي لا تصل إليها كهرباء في هذه الأيام وهناك حاجة لها. ونحن أيضا متحمسون لأن نقدم لكم تقنية توربينات الغاز الخاصة بنا الحديثة، والتي تعمل في أكثر من 40 موقع حول العالم، والعديد من هذه المواقع هي في المنطقة، وتقوم بتوفير حوالي 65% من فعالية الدورة. كل من في هذه الغرفة يفهم أهمية ويعي أهمية الطاقة الكهربائية. من دون الطاقة الكهربائية لن تتحسن معايير العيش للأناس وسوف تنخفض. لا أحد يريد في أي بلد بالعالم أن يعيش هكذا، وشركتنا تبقى شريك يفتخر بالعمل مع العراق ودعم تطوير العراق، دعم تطوير البنية التحتية للعراق. ونحن نقف معكم حتى في الفترة المقبلة في المستقبل كما كنا في الماضي. يمكن أن نكون شريك يعتمد عليه. نعمل معكم بكل شفافية ونقوم بالإيفاء بوعودنا لحضراتكم. شكرا لكم للسماح لنا بالتواجد معكم اليوم، وشكرا لكم بالسماح بشراكتنا تدخل معكم في تطوير البنية التحتية الخاصة بكم، ونحن نتطلع إلى تعاون مثمر أفضل في المستقبل. شكرا جزيلا لحضراتكم. شكرا جزيلا سيد شون رايس. الآن سوف نقوم بتشغيلكم فيديو من شركة GE حول جهدهم في العراق.
هي بيئة تدعم الشباب بالعراق. الجي اي بالنسبة لي مو مجرد شغل وروتين عمل يومي رايحين جايين. الجي اي بالنسبة لي فرصة انه اطور نفسي واطور مجتمعي. هو بالنسبة لي مكان دا اكتشف فيه قدراتي اللي ممكن ما اكتشفها بأي شركة ثانية. بسبب العمل في جي اي وفرت لي مرونة في اوقات العمل، وهذا الشيء خلاني اتمكن من التوفيق بين عملي وبيتي.
عندي 7 سنوات صار لي بالجي اي. دخلت كنت اغطي فقط العراق، كان حلم صغير، كان طموح صغير. حاليا انا اغطي منطقه واكثر من قطر، وهاي فقط صار ممكن مع الجي اي.
من انا صغيره والدي مهندس كهرباء، كان يحلم يشوفني مهندسه كهرباء. كنت اشوفه يروح للمحطات يلبس اليونيفورم مالته، كان يرجع للبيت يتمنى يشوفني كمهندسه كهرباء. حلمه وحلمي يتحقق. انا مهندسه كهرباء حاليا، اشتغل باحلى شركه من شركات توليد الطاقه بالعالم هي جي اي.
السبب الأساسي لشغلنا مع جي لأنه إحنا عندنا الإيمان إنه إحنا نقدم التطوير والمساهمة في القطاع الصحي في العراق، ومساعدة الحكومة العراقية بتطوير الكهرباء وإيصال الكهرباء إلى كل بيت عراقي، وإن شاء الله نكون قادرين على تحقيق هذا الشيء.
Thank you. I will now invite His Excellency Ahmed Ibrahim, Chief
سعادته السيد أحمد
Executive of the Gulf
الإبراهيم
Cooperation Council
المسؤول
Interconnection
التنفيذي
Authority.
للجي سي
Thank
سي
you.
اي اي. شكرا جزيلا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. معالي السيد فؤاد حسين نائب رئيس الوزراء للشؤون الاقتصادية وزير المالية، معالي الدكتور لؤي الخطيب وزير الكهرباء، معالي السيد جمال العادلي وزير مصادر المياه، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، السيدات والسادة الحضور الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يطيب لي مع افتتاح منتدى العراق الخامس للطاقة أن أنقل لكم تحيات رئيس وأعضاء مجلس إدارة هيئة الربط الكهربائي لدول مجلس التعاون لدول الخليج العربية، وتمنياتهم بالتوفيق لهذا المنتدى، وكذلك تمنياتنا بالتوفيق والاستقرار والازدهار لجمهورية العراق وشعبها الكريم. واسمحوا لي أن تكون كلمتي هذه باللغة الإنجليزية. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to address
من
such
دواعي الشرف والسرور أن ألقي خطابي على هكذا جمهور في منتدى العراق للطاقة الخامس ومناقشة المشاكل والمعوقات في القطاع الكهربائي العراقي أو قطاع الطاقة العراقي. لدينا شعار هذا اليوم الذي هو التعاون الاقتصادي من أجل السلام والزاد في الشرق الأوسط، وأتى في أفضل وقت، الوقت الذي يقوم به العراق بتحسين علاقاته الاقتصادية مع الدول الأخرى. نأمل أن هذا الجهد سوف يأخذ العراق ويعطيه مكانته كرائد في الطاقة في المنطقة، ويقوي التعاون في الطاقة في المنطقة. أن قطاع الطاقة في المنطقة يواجه تحديات كبيرة كاقتصاد عالمي. من المتوقع أنه في 2050 سوف يكون لدينا 4 أضعاف الاقتصاد، إذا سوف يكون لدينا نمو كبير. هذا النمو يجب أن يكون مصحوبا بطاقة تولده. هذا أيضا يضع لدينا ضغطا هذا يضغط على الموارد الطبيعية. إذا نأمل أن نوفر احتياجات الطاقة التي تكون متوافقة مع النمو. هذا الجهد يتطلب تغيرات هيكلية في شبكات الكهرباء والنظام الكهربائي، وإذا يجب أن نعتمد على مصادر جديدة للطاقة، من ضمنها الطاقة المتجددة، وأيضا الاختراق المتزايد للطاقة المتجددة في الشبكة أيضا يوفر بعض المخاطر التي يجب أن يتم التحكم بها، مخاطر على الشبكة. يجب أن نضمن أمن الشبكة وأمن الكهرباء من خلال القيام بمشاريع وتنفيذها، مشاريع محلية ومشاريع إقليمية.
United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, and Kuwait. It is now 10 years ago when the GCC interconnection grid commenced operation in February of 2009, starting with the energization of its first station in Al Zur in Kuwait. Since then, the GCC interconnection grid succeeded to provide mutual support to the GCC grids in over 1,800 incidents, resulting in avoiding power outages or blackouts, thus providing a high level of reliability and security of supplies to the GCC power grids. This new high reliability level of the GCC power grids has become vital to supporting a strong GCC economic growth. Further to that, there have been significant economic benefits and savings from the GCC interconnectors for the GCC countries. During 2018, the GCC interconnector has managed to achieve savings of around $284 million for the GCC member states, bringing the cumulative economic savings of the interconnector since its commissioning to around $2.8 billion versus its initial.
وصلت الإدخارات إلى أكثر.
Meanwhile, the GCCIA has worked for the past years to promote the utilization of the available capacity of the GCC interconnector for energy trade and exchange on economic basis, which allow optimal dispatch and utilization of energy resources within the GCC and beyond. The GCC Interconnector Authority has therefore started exploring promising new interconnection possibilities beyond the GCC to the neighboring countries. Interconnecting Iraq was identified as one of the promising interconnection opportunities, and the GCC and Iraq have started discussing and exploring such opportunities since early last year. I am happy to announce that fruitful discussions between the GCC and Iraq has yielded a principal agreement to connect the south of Iraq to the GCC interconnection 400 kV supergrid, which will aim to achieve an initial supply of 500 megawatts of power to the south of Basra, and possibly increasing in the future to 1,800 megawatts. On long-term basis, we hope to be part of interconnection of a bigger capacity HVDC that will go through the center of Iraq towards the north, and this could be an entry into Turkey and Europe and other regions. Through such interconnection, Iraq not only can support its own energy needs for a more developed Iraq, but also can play a vital role as a regional hub of energy exchange between its neighbors and beyond, and can contribute significantly in developing regional economic cooperation and regional integration. I wish all of you a very successful forum and hope that it will meet its objective to promote
البحرين، السعودية، عمان وقطر والكويت. والآن مضى 10 سنوات على أول شبكة رابطة التي بدأت في 2009، حيث بدأت هذه الشبكة في الزور في دول الخليج، وكانت هناك فوائد اقتصادية متعددة وإدخال الطاقة عظيم من هذه الشبكة الرابطة لدول الخليج التعاونية. وفي 2018 الشبكة هذه الرابطة قامت بإدخال أكثر من 200 مليون دولار من الطاقة لدول الخليج عبر هذه الشبكة الرابطة. وأيضا وصلت الإدخارات إلى أكثر من حاليا أكثر من 2.5 مليار دولار. وهذه الشبكة الناقلة
of the available capacity of the GCC interconnector for energy trade and exchange on economic basis, which allow optimal dispatch and utilization of energy resources within the GCC and beyond. The GCC Interconnector Authority has therefore started exploring promising new interconnection possibilities beyond the GCC to the neighboring countries. Interconnecting Iraq was identified as one of the promising interconnection opportunities, and the GCC and Iraq have started discussing and exploring such opportunities since early last year. I am happy to announce that fruitful discussions between the GCC and Iraq has yielded a principal agreement to connect the south of Iraq to the GCC interconnection 400 kV supergrid, which will aim to achieve an initial
الولايات الخليجية سوف تقوم بتوفير أكثر من 400 ميجا واط، وخصوصا في البصرة، ونأمل أن نزيد هذا في المستقبل 800 ميجا واط، وعلى نحو مستمر نأمل أن نكون شريك مع شبكات رابطة أكثر في العراق. نبدأ بالبصرة وسط العراق وشمال العراق ومن ثم تركيا وغيرها، والعراق نستطيع أن ندعمه أكثر من مجرد طاقة، حيث العراق نعم نساعده في تطوير الطاقة، والعراق نفسه سوف يتمكن من دعم المنطقة عندما يتم تطويره، لأنه لديه طاقة ضخمة وسوف يلعب دورا كبيرا في الاقتصاد الإقليمي والإدماج، وسوف يتمكن العراق من
economic cooperation towards Middle East peace and prosperity. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
مع الاقتصاد الإقليمي. أتمنى لكم منتدى ناجح، ونتمنى أيضا أن يكون مثمر للغاية لفرص المتواجدة في الشرق الأوسط. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed Ibrahim, for your kind speech. Now I'm inviting.
شكرا جزيلا للسيد أحمد إبراهيم على خطابك. الآن
Inviting Mr. Ali Shmara, the chairman of Shmara Group, to deliver his speech. Thank you.
السيد علي شمارة لإلقاء كلمته.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
All the most gracious
أستاذ
ladies, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen of the audience, we welcome you, dear brothers, and in this blessed forum that we wish for it and for you all the success. As everyone knows that this country has suffered a lot in the last 4 decades. But with the efforts of the good people of its citizens and the friend countries and corporations, it started to rise up again through an ambitious plan put by the current government and the consecutive governments represented by the Ministry of Electricity that started to take a new direction, which is the distribution of rules between depending on the abilities of the ministry and the encouragement of the private sector to invest in this vital sector. From here we have started, my brothers, from the local companies to take initiative in building, if only a part of the sector, which is the power generation, electricity power generation. Our company started over 70 years ago to work in industrial and commercial institutions that contributed to the building of the Iraqi economy, either in yet in the power sector. Work has started about 30 years ago. We have built many electrical stations since, for example, since 2004, which is the year of change. We have built many stations and we have operated them on all sorts of fuel, natural gas, oil, and others. Southern Baghdad, Karbala, Eldora refinery, all of these. The last one was the investment Ramallah project with production of 300 megawatts. This investment will cost about $2.5 million, which have and contributed and will contribute to provide the electricity power to millions of people in the Basra and the southern provinces of Iraq. We would like to clarify that the total units that have been built are more than 50 generating units, which is a great achievement in the electricity field. The renewable energy is our future goal. We are now working on achieving a pilot project of an ambitious large project that serves hundreds, yet thousands of houses, and we will increase our attention to the increase of the electricity production and to create a healthy environment. As for in the field of cooperation with the investment companies, we have signed with Basra Gas Company, represented by Shell Company, which contribute actively in the investment of the accompanying gas which burns. We will provide them with the electricity in exchange for them providing us with natural gas. This is the first time that two companies, one international and one local, that cooperate in this field. Dear audience, our ambition has no limits, but what is important for us is the capacity building and the staff capacity building from the newly graduates and the extinguished people. We have a plan drafted. One of the goals is the building of the human being before building stones. We have trained many youth and sent them to abroad to be trained in order to become the generation that will continue to develop the group and will contribute actively in building an Iraq, a strong, prosper Iraq. I wish you all the success in this forum, and I'm sure that the government chaired by Mr. Adel Abdel Mahdi and the chairman of the power, Mr. Al Ghafman, and the Minister of Electricity and all of the staff and the deputy ministers of the electricity have given us a new hope to build a system based on a correct basis. Thank you so much for listening with appreciation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ali Shmara, for your kind speech. Now we will start with our first plenary session for the day. The session is titled The Role of Multinational Companies Empowering Iraq. Speakers include His Excellency Sami Al-Araji, Chairman, National Investment Commission; William Wakila, President and CEO of GE Iraq and Levant; Mus'ab Al-Khatib, Chief Executive Officer of Siemens Iraq; Khalid Abu Rihab, Director of Business Development at Pagesco; Hari Estepanian, Senior Fellow at the Iraq Energy Institute. The session is going to be moderated by Ali Safa, Middle East Program Director at the International Energy Agency. May all speakers and moderators approach the stage. Thank you.
In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most gracious.
السادة أصحاب المعالي والسعادة المحترمين، السيدات السادة المحترمين، نرحب بكم إخواني الأعزاء في هذا المنتدى المبارك الذي نتمنى له ولكم كل النجاح. كما يعلم الجميع أن هذا البلد قد عانى الكثير خلال ال4 عقود الماضية، ولكن بجهود الخيرين من أبنائه والدول والشركات الصديقة قد بدأ بالنهوض من جديد من خلال خطة طموحة وضعتها الحكومة الحالية والحكومات المتعاقبة، متمثلة بوزارة الكهرباء التي بدأت تأخذ منحى جديد، ألا وهو توزيع الأدوار ما بين الاعتماد على إمكانيات الوزارة وبين تشجيع القطاع الخاص للاستثمار في هذا القطاع الحيوي. ومن هنا بدأنا نحن وإخواني من الشركات المحلية بأخذ المبادرة والمساهمة الفاعلة في بناء ولو بجزء من هذا القطاع، ألا هو قطاع توليد الطاقة الكهربائية، حيث بدأت شركتنا منذ أكثر من 70 عاما بالعمل بمنشآت صناعية وتجارية ساهمت في بناء الاقتصاد العراقي. أما في قطاع الطاقة فقد بدأ العمل، ومنذ حوالي 30 عاما بنينا من خلالها العديد من المحطات الكهربائية. ومنذ عام 2004 وهو عام التغيير بنينا محطات كثيرة عملنا على تشغيلها على جميع أنواع الوقود من الغاز الطبيعي والنفط والوقود الثقيل، كمحطة جنوب بغداد والسماوة والحلة وكربلاء ومصفى الدورة، وتوجت آخرها بمشروع الرميلة الاستثماري بطاقة إنتاجية ستصل إلى 3000 ميجا واط. هذا الاستثمار سيصل كلفة الاستثمار فيه حوالي 2.5 مليار دولار، والذي ساهم بتجهيز الطاقة الكهربائية لملايين الأشخاص في محافظات البصرة ومحافظات الجنوب. كما نود أن نبين أن مجموع الوحدات التي تم بناؤها لغاية الآن من قبل مجموعتنا هي أكثر من 50 وحدة توليدية، وهذا الرقم كبير في مجال الطاقة الكهربائية. أما في مجال الطاقة المتجددة فهذا هو هدفنا المستقبلي. نعمل الآن على إنجاز بايلوت بروجكت، مشروع كبير طموح يخدم المئات بل الآلاف من المنازل. كما سنساهم في زيادة الاهتمام بالطاقة المتجددة من أجل زيادة الإنتاج وخلق بيئة مناخية صحيحة وتقليل الكربون والمساهمة في بناء بيئة أفضل. أما في مجال التعاون مع الشركات الاستثمارية فقد قمنا بالتوقيع مع شركة غاز البصرة متمثلة بشركة شيل التي تساهم بشكل فعال باستثمار الغاز المصاحب الذي يحترق، وسنقوم بتجهيزهم بالطاقة الكهربائية مقابل تجهيزنا بالغاز الطبيعي بدلا من إحراقه. وهذه هي المرة الأولى لتعاون شركتين استثماريتين عالمية ومحلية في هذا المجال المهم. إخواني الأعزاء، أن طموحنا ليس له حدود، ولكن ما يهمنا هو بناء الإنسان وتدريب الكوادر المحلية من الخريجين الجدد والمتميزين، حيث رسمنا خطة. أحد أهم أهداف هذه الخطة هو بناء الإنسان قبل بناء الحجر، حيث قمنا بتدريب العديد من الشباب وإرسالهم إلى بعثات وتدريبهم خارج العراق ليكونوا الجيل الذي سيستمر ويطور المجموعة، وبالتالي سيساهم بشكل فعال في بناء عراق قوي مزدهر. أتمنى لكم أخواني كل النجاح في هذا المنتدى، وإني على ثقة أن الحكومة برئاسة السيد عادل عبد المهدي والكادر المتقدم من نائب رئيس الوزراء الدكتور ثامر الغضبان رئيس لجنة الطاقة، والدكتور الأخ العزيز وزير الكهرباء الدكتور لؤي الخطيب، والأخوة والأخوات وكلاء الوزارة وكادر الوزارة. وحقيقة دعمهم أعطانا الأمل الجديد في بناء منظومة على أسس صحيحة. نشكر لكم حسن استماعكم وكل الشكر والتقدير. شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ali Shmara, for your kind speech. Now we will start with our...
نحن سنبدأ بالجلسة الأولى، وهي تتكلم أو تتحدث عن دور الشركات في إنتاج الطاقة في العراق. يترأس الجلسة السيد سامي العرجي من والسيد خالد أبو رحاب رئيس تطوير الأعمال، مدير تطوير الأعمال، والسيد مصعب الخطيب رئيس شركة سيمنز، وعلي السفار من وكالة الطاقة الدولية مدير مشروع الشرق الأوسط، والسيد هاري استيفانيان.
At the International Energy Agency, where we've been focusing on Iraq for several years and did a deep study into this issue this year. The International Energy Agency is traditionally seen as a body that is concerned with oil and gas. So why are we looking so deeply into the electricity sector, specifically in Iraq? Now, the main reason is because if you look at the oil and gas sector, there is no doubt about it, it is the bedrock of this economy today. But if Iraq is to progress further, to diversify its economy, to create the kinds of jobs that it needs to create, then the electricity sector and rehabilitating the electricity sector will be absolutely fundamental. Reliable and affordable electricity will be the bedrock of tomorrow's Iraqi economy. Without it, industries will stay stunted and shortages will risk social unrest, especially in the summer months. The challenges are many. There's a lack of maintenance in the current fleet that can only produce a fraction of their nameplate capacity. There's losses in transmission and distribution, which are among the highest in the world. The capital budget is almost entirely dependent on fluctuations in the oil price. Grid tariffs are among the lowest in the world, so at present do not capture any of the costs of producing that electricity. But on the other extreme, the reliance on neighborhood generators is extremely expensive, charging sometimes as much as 4 times the average price of electricity in Germany. There's, of course, as the minister himself said today, also a large increase in demand, about 10% over the last year, mirroring an improving economic situation, but also large-scale demographic shifts. Now, as His Excellency, the Minister, mentioned in his speech this morning, the electricity sector is the responsibility of all, and these challenges are perhaps too great for the Ministry of Electricity to tackle alone. So what role can the private sector play in helping achieve Iraq's power sector ambitions? If the panel that sits here today cannot answer this question, then perhaps nobody can, because it includes Dr. Sami al-Araji, the chairman of Iraq's National Investment Commission, the man responsible for stimulating private sector investment across this country. It also includes William Wakila and Mus'ab al-Khatib, who are responsible for the Iraq operations of GE and Siemens respectively. Together they represent almost the entirety of Iraq's power generating fleet. It also includes Khalid Abu Rihab from Pagesco, who are an EPC management company with extensive experience in this country, but also in Egypt, where Siemens has had some recent success. And last but not least, Harry Estepanian, a senior fellow at the Iraq Energy Institute, who we call on often for his expertise at the International Energy Agency. So without further ado, I wanted to pass the floor to Dr. Sami Al-Araji for his comments on this issue.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. دولة نائب رئيس الوزراء، معالي وزير الكهرباء، معالي السادة الإخوة الأعزة من النواب وأعضاء السلك الدبلوماسي وكل الحضور مع حفظ
diplomatic representatives, dear audience, it is very useful to speak in Arabic, but to give an insight of where investment is. The energy sector and its importance in Iraq. We have adopted with the ministries, the vital ministries, especially MOP, MOF, a fundamental pillar for the next few years to reach the desired goals in 2030, and we have committed to these goals with the United Nations. We have put plans to achieve these goals. There are two plans, 2018 and 2022, and a further plan with the correction of some paragraphs and some points. The first pillar is to find resources for wealth in Iraq, new resources from economic aspects, which I think very productive, and service sectors. The productive is the oil and gas and electricity, health, industry, agriculture, transportation, tourism, and communication. The service part is about education and housing, and what relates to the infrastructures, roads, wastewater, and other services to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals in 2013. The second pillar is the reformation in the state, to manage the state with financial and economical policies, and the important role for the private sector and the industrial projects, the SMEs as well. The third pillar, which is very important in this aspect, is the investment, the foreign and national investment, to cover some of the requirements of this ambitious plan and basic plan for the prosperity of this country. Today, in its fifth term, we are dependent on obtaining many resources from you, as their excellencies have mentioned yesterday and today, to achieve expansion in the electricity, energy, and expansion in the oil industry as well. We need large resources for the country that we can provide the required services through them, and as have been put in the National Development Plan. Therefore, the national I will answer some of the questions regarding other sectors, but now we are in the theme of energy. The local or national investment sector has very important role, and I could say that 50% of the energy produced today is done by the private sector, the Iraqi private sector, accompanied by the foreign companies and the international companies. Many of them are here today. Mr. Ahmed Ismail, Mr. Ali Shmara, from a car company and from Mason Energy Company have given us about 8,500, including the expansion. A list with GE is about 10,000 megawatts. Mr. Elchmar has mentioned the depth of this energy historically, which is my duty to highlight this since I am in the place of leading this sector. The opportunity today and the major challenge is how to obtain resources from this sector. Yesterday, His Excellency Thamer Al-Adwan has mentioned the importance of the gas and oil and how to produce these resources. And today we have seen the ambitions of the Ministry of Electricity as well. I have the in 2030, maybe, and I leave the numbers to those who mentioned the numbers, so maybe it will be double energy from what they mentioned in 2030, which is a very ambitious thing. I would say a very important word in this topic as a supporter for the investment and investors. These plans actually will not be successful in electricity unless there will be fees on the citizens that they have to pay, because we all have to pay for the electricity fees in order to get to the production that we need. Maybe the state is very supportive, and I have the honor to be part of the first signature for the investment in the electricity sector for the first 6,000, followed by the rest. We have a very good plan for the retreat as a state, and to give the floor to the investment part. But due to the conditions that we have seen from 2012 until now, what we have seen in the electricity sector, we haven't achieved what we want. But we wish that, which is very important for our success, we need to achieve what we want. And we have given opportunities for fee collectors, but they didn't do their work. Thank you so much. شكرا جزيلا الدكتور سامي العرجي. هناك نقطتين أردت أن أتابعها معك، وأود القيام بهذا قبل الانتقال للشخص الآخر من اللجنة. ذكرت القطاع الخاص، وذكرت أن هناك مسؤولية على المستثمرين من المحليين، وكما فهمت أن هناك 5 مشاريع عبر القطر تنفذ. هل هناك، أعتقد بالتأكيد أن الطاقة المتجددة أن تتجه بهذا الاتجاه. حجي تعال.
أنا أؤمن بأن الطاقة الموجودة حاليا تعني أن لدينا العديد من الطاقة التي هنالك حاجة إليها في المستقبل، وبالإضافة إلى ذلك أيضا أعتقد أن الصيانة والأعمال اللوجستية لهذا قطاع طاقة مهم للغاية. إذن لا ننظر فقط.
But also there is a very big and important sector. It's called the maintenance and logistics around this sector. which I believe most of it is Iraqi nationals. A lot of the international companies like GE and Siemens depend on Iraqi nationals in that, and independent contractors hopefully will spring out. And of course, the renewable energy, all of it that has been declared by the Ministry of Electricity are investment programs.
So the idea then is to have a supply chain that develops and creates jobs and all the rest of it. But one thing that I wanted to ask you on as well was, you mentioned logistics, you mentioned maintenance. Transmission and distribution, is there any talk of bringing in private investment here?
Well, unless you give him an incentive, and to be very honest, I worked on that a lot because I believe the success of your program to have the almost generated capacity reaches its goal without these losses, whether it be losses out of the, let's say, the aging of the network or the, what we call it, the malfunctioning of the network itself. I believe that in this, if we could give an incentive enough to combine both transmission, distribution, and collection, both, and guarantee the collection in a good manner, we will achieve the goal that we were looking for. But if you could just give him one segment of it and just let him off facing the reality of the hour, I don't think he will succeed. So what we are looking at in the National Investment Commission, and this is that we are looking at a combination of transmission, distribution, and collection of the money in a manner that hopefully we are working on ideas with the Ministry of Electricity to see how we reach it. So far, which it has not, and I would like to say, frankly, the collection was giving also the responsibility of maintenance of the network itself as well. Mm-hmm. But because of the limited amount of return on your investment in this, has not allowed the investors to go ahead and maintain the distribution network. Therefore, we have to ensure that the collection is proper, they get their share, and they enter, hopefully, in a big transaction to try to repair and rehabilitate the network.
So this is a discussion that kind of spans between the National Investment Commission, but of course the Ministry of Electricity in terms of tariff reform and perhaps even subsidies reform.
Exactly.
Unless you do otherwise, it's going to be difficult to incentivize the kind of
the reality of the hour that we are living it right now. We have signed several, the number I could say it, but it's still variable. But we have almost most of the provinces has been covered, either partially or totally by private collectors or tariff, let's say, investors, electricity tariffs investors. We could call it that way. This is a new word that I'm using. But they have not been able to achieve what we have wanted them to achieve, because the reality of the hour still, a lot of the people look at electricity as God-given gift by the government that has to be given to a lot of these people. And unless we really enter into the field and say, look, this is produced at such and such cost, and you have this share, and I believe we can convince them if we could do the following. For example, we could give a good support, let's say, to the needed segments of the population. It will be a very, let's say, a small segment that he will be paying, and then as the Ministry of Electricity is doing, but we are not at the, let's say, level that we can say it's a very satisfactory level. Then you go exponentially with whatever consumption you have. But since the majority of the people get a power that in certain provinces is interrupted power, and they spend a lot of money from their income on independent producers, Muwallidat, so he's not able to pay here and there. And Muwallida, if he does not pay, he takes off the plug and leave him. So he is depending on the generosity of the government to give him whatever it gives him. And that has been really a difficult combination for across sector, a big sector of the population. And therefore, we have to put a program, the Ministry of Electricity, us, the United, and any other agency in the government, to try to get this process moving in a successful manner, not to expand too much and without having a resource opposite. So what we did, we went ahead with all the provinces opening up, but we don't have enough electricity to support it, because he is going to pay when you give him 24 hours. What will he do? He'll pull out from independent producers and give it to you. But he cannot pay the two at one time. Therefore, what I proposed is that let's go down, look at some of the sectors or segments or sections of these governorates, and then move ahead as the power producing improve. And then you will convince the people that, okay, I am giving you, give me a return. These are some of the difficulties that we faced.
So this last point that you mentioned, and I will want to call on both of you, William and Mus'ab, after your interventions on this issue specifically, because it seems to me like there's this vicious cycle right now where you have low investment because you're looking at relying on the Power Ministry's capital expenditure allocation. The production of electricity suffers. People are looking to neighborhood generators. These guys capture quite large revenues, and therefore they're not paying their electricity bills, and so there's not enough of an investment budget back to the ministry. Where do you break that cycle? William, I think it's time for your intervention, but at the same time, if you could establish where it is that you break this cycle, how to break this cycle of low investment and low revenues, and what the Iraqi government can do to remedy that, and what role the private sector has in helping to remedy that.
Right, that's many questions in one, so let me break it relative to what companies like GE can bring forward in terms of technology, in terms of products, and in terms of skills, people, and so on. What I cannot help you with is the policy question. Okay, so we know ultimately what Iraq needs, similar to every other country in the region, is reliable, cost-effective power that's accessible to the entire population. We believe we bring multiple solutions, as we have been doing over the past 40, 50 years, really more intensively over the last 10, 15 years. When you look at the installed base in the country, despite all the challenges, the technology we brought was the best fit. When you look at lack of clean fuel, for example, shortage of gas, when we needed gas turbines to run on heavy fuel and crude, that was something we were able to help with. Similarly, on the transmission side, obviously the substations that we are building and we will continue to build, now that we're talking about rebuilding the western areas, Anbar, interconnection to Jordan, other countries. So that's another side that GE can help with. We can talk about technologies that fit the times relative, so what we've been able to do in the past, and we can also take a look at the future. We know once the fuel issue, for example, is fixed in this country, we will also bring the right technology for that time. To give you an example, John, our chairman, talked about the latest HA technology. Just to give you a ballpark figure, when he talks about 64% efficiency, that means we can generate twice the power for the same amount of fuel. That is significant. So all in due time will hopefully contribute to a brighter future in Iraq. Where we talk about now the policy issues, is there enough investment available, and we hear different ideas about privatized generation, and I think country has taken significant steps. So the multiple IPPs, a lot of them are partnering with us. So Mass Global, Shamara, various others, working using GE technology, GE products in a private mode. If you take a look at the ultimate challenge, we know the needs are larger than the means. So all of the studies can tell you whether it's generation, transmission, distribution. just this monumental job, you know, with all the baggage, the history, pre-war. You know, we're talking the last 30, 40 years, there's been an underinvestment in this sector. And when we look at the tens of billions of dollars that are needed, it becomes very clear the limitation is going to be in budgeting. So very clear, we cannot do it on EPCF, we cannot do it all on the government budget. So therefore, the private sector is relevant. What I wanted to say is beyond privatized generation, I think there needs to be more thinking. I think we've heard some of that. I was just in Abu Dhabi World Energy Council, so we've heard His Excellency Dr. Lu'ay Thamer talk about touching on tariff reform, because that's really what it comes down to. Ultimately, electricity needs to pay for itself. If you look at all the countries around you, and they've all gone through similar experiences, you know, you can look at all the Gulf countries where they really did not even need to privatize. You know, they had the means to give away power for free. Look at Jordan, for example, and their experience over the past 15, 20 years. It wasn't only privatized generation, it was privatized distribution. Okay, so that is a policy matter. There are multiple layers to it. There is a legal framework that needs to go. It's a longer term prospect. So on average, you're talking 8 to 10 years. Assuming you've got the political will, you've got consensus that that's the way forward. Once the consumer understands that ultimately it will be more cost effective to pay the $20, $30 for his monthly or her monthly bill as compared to the $200 and $300 that are paid to run a diesel generator that's adding to the pollution, and that's really what it comes down to. So once I think we figure out the privatized distribution, there's been many experiments here, I think we're not there yet. I think that would be the key to move the entire sector forward.
So this issue you talk about of tariff collection, you know, government versus private sector generation is something that we looked into quite considerably in the IEA and found that the average household bill is actually extremely high over here, but that's being captured by the neighborhood generators, who are of course charging almost monopoly rents on capacity rather than consumption. So it's also a very, very inefficient way to run a system. But completely agree with everything that you have said. May I call in Mus'ab, because of course you play a very similar role to GE in this country, and we'd like to get your perspective.
Well, I don't think that this is a technology issue. Siemens is uniquely positioned to tackle the problems that exist in the power generation, transmission, and distribution subsectors of the electricity sector. However, it is a policy and incentive problem. It's a high friction issue that is also paradoxical at the same time. The government itself is the sustainer of the electricity sector, yet it also must find the discipline to extricate itself from it. And that's a difficult role to master. That can be done through policy and by ensuring that foreign investors are sufficiently incentivized in order to take over the transmission and distribution sector slowly. Yes. Thus far, the experiments in privatization on the distribution sector have not yielded the desirable results. So I think more work needs to be done in realigning those incentives appropriately and ensuring that there is a runway for growth for the distribution sector as well as the transmission sector. I mean, ultimately, these three subsectors have got to be become more independent from one another and in the hands of utilities. But that journey has to begin somewhere, and it's up to the government to at the same time, you know, maintain the current production and live up to the expectations of the population, while at the same time planning for the day when it divorces itself from it.
Okay.
That's it.
So I'd like to call on Khalid, whose company has been here for around 8 years, but has obviously quite significant experience in Egypt as well. And you are, in some ways, on the other side of this equation. You do the EPCM for large companies. Now, one of the things I'd like to ask you about is, what are the impediments that you're facing? Where is it that you feel Iraqi cadres need to be built? And I think this is also a question for William and for Mus'ab as well. I mean, what are the impediments that you've been seeing, and how best to remedy them, specifically also from the point of view of people power, man and woman power, I suppose. Are you seeing that they're up to the level that you would expect, and what can be done to help it? First with Khalid, and then...
Okay. First, I would like to say that Pijesco is an engineering company. Its main charter is to provide engineering and procurement, construction management services for power plant projects, and also to provide startup commissioning and design training programs and improve the human resources of the client, any client. As Mus'ab mentioned, I think the tariff issue and the return on the investment is a technology issue. It's a matter of policies and strategies of the concerned government. However, this could be, I also agree with His Excellency that achieving fair tariff would encourage more investment in the power sector, and this can only be designed and achieved by the government and its policies. And we have a model we had done in Egypt in the recent years, where the government has adopted a subsidies lifting program for the electricity prices. But in order to do that, it was a gradual program, but in order to do that, you have to supply reliable power to the people, to the consumers. And this is done by cooperating with companies like Siemens and GE, and put more capacity on a fast-track basis. And I am proud that Pijesco was a part of this program that resulted in a reliable power capacity in the grid with a remarkable reserve that can compensate for any interruption. And then people start to feel that they can rely on the supply of power. Then they are now convinced that they have to pay for that power. The other factor is the transparency, that you announce in advance, that next year the subsidies will be left by that percentage, the year after will be that much, so there are no surprises. This is what I have to comment on this issue. The other thing, investment in the power sector, in our opinion in Pijesco, is not only investment and money, but also it has to be investment in the human resources and the human capital, because the building capacities, either generation facilities or transmission lines and substations, without having the resources that can operate and maintain them efficiently, then there will be a wasted investment. In Pijesco, we have started a few years ago a good program with the Ministry of Electricity here in Iraq to study establishing a center within the ministry to provide some engineering services for the ministry projects, things like design reviews, some procurement know-how, tendering knowledge and evaluation, things like that, performance testing, things like that. And we started that program by having around 25 Iraqi engineers in our offices in Cairo to train them on all these aspects, including planning and project controls. And we were hoping that we could continue this program with the ministry, and I think we started recently discussion about this concept, and we are hoping to continue this program because we do believe that without human resources, good human resources capable to maintain these investment, then you are missing a very important element. Whether the projects are private or governmental, human resources are very important. And I think GE mentioned in their word that they have trained 800 people, Iraqi elements, in different aspects of operation and maintenance.
More than that, really.
More than that, okay.
I can speak
I guess, and I believe in Egypt, Siemens did the same. They have trained over 600-700 people from the electricity sector, and they were providing H-frame turbines, which is a complicated technology, and now is operated and maintained by local elements. We believe that this can be achieved easily in Iraq. However, Pejesco is focusing on other things other than operation and maintenance, but we are talking about localizing the know-how of how to plan, how to manage, how to safeguard any new power project. And this is what we are trying to do here in the country, and inshallah we'll be successful in doing this.
So you said increasing capacity, then improving the grid, and then starting to talk about tariff reform, and this is the element that's interesting to me, which is that requires investment. And I'd like to hear from Siemens and from GE, what are your assessments of the capital needs to bring Iraq to the level where you have reliable electricity supply? You've both your companies did assessments on the needs for Iraq. What are we talking about in terms of capital cost? You can take it in turn.
I think the numbers are fairly clear. So if you look at generation, we're looking demand growth going from 6-7% now up to 10% a year. So you're talking 2 gigawatts a year. That's for the next 5, 10, 15 years. Multiply each gigawatt by roughly 1 billion. That gives you a figure. If you look at distribution, that's been really set behind over the time, hasn't received the attention. We're just getting to it. That's probably a $20 billion problem. Transmission, as we've seen last summer, we're approaching the limits. So as we get to 18, 19 gigawatts, we come very close to failures. That would be substantial. So one fault can actually knock out 70-80% of the country, as we have just seen. So that means further investments into transmission. And again, that's 400 kV substations, 132 kV substations, overhead lines like the ones we are executing right now, and the next project in Anbar and interconnection areas. So it's a substantial investment that's needed. We're talking on the orders $30-40 billion. Just depends whether you want to execute in 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years. So balance that against constraints in budget. That gives you the answer. You cannot just depend on government budget. You need to bring in the private sector to help fund it. Structured project finance is the way to go, similar to what's been happening again across the region. So it's not rocket science. It just requires the right partners, maybe starting with the political will first, but we see that moving. Financing is a challenge, I have to tell you. We know from experience, it's taken us a bit longer. We've worked on over $2 billion worth of financing, mostly on ECA basis. So we know that takes quite a bit of a challenge. And we depend on the help of the right people here. Dr. Araji, extremely helpful, just down to simple matters, how to get things. Our colleagues and partners at the Ministry of Finance, again, I think they see the importance to move forward. Really, the entire government here is now much more sensitized that time is of the essence. When we're looking at the gap, so I continue to say the cup is half full, right? Everybody complains we haven't fixed electricity. But when you consider we started with 3,000 megawatts back in 2003, stayed hanging around 3, 4, 5 for many years, right? And it wasn't until the last 8 years or so where we started to pick up the pace. To date, even at 5 times that power, 6 times that power, we still have a gap of 6 gigawatts, and the gap can increase. So that gives you an idea about how things are connected.
No, thank you. It's kind of harrowing to think that just for the distribution network you need 20 billion, which is, you know, a fair segment of the Iraqi national budget, let alone the budget for the Ministry of Electricity. So, you know, looking at these financing structures would obviously be quite essential. Musab, how do these numbers tally with your own assessments?
Well, our assessments aren't very different. I think we both get our information from the Ministry of Electricity, who is the one that assesses these investment requirements, and I agree with my colleague Bill about that. And I think the Minister of Electricity mentioned a figure of 30 billion recently. I mean, the rule of thumb for power generation is at current prices is $1 billion for each gigawatt. It's not as easy to have a rule of thumb for transmission and distribution. So because they're more diverse and more complex in a way. It's that last mile that is challenging, and quite costly. And given the lack of investment in these subsectors, it's easy to imagine having to contemplate somewhere between 20 and 30 billion. But the thing is, this is not just about cost. We need to look at the social benefits that come from it. The development of the electricity sector, as my colleague on the left mentioned, Khalid, he talked about the human element. I mean, we rarely look at, we're installing all this sophisticated equipment, but ultimately, yes, we will bring people expertise from abroad to help with the installation, commissioning, and erection of this infrastructure. But it's ultimately Iraqis who have to do the work to maintain it. So there's a massive social benefit that comes along with that. I mean, this is kind of like looking at it from an economics point of view, which is a social science, and the accounting point of view, which is not. I know that the accountants are going to hit me afterwards, but basically, we need to look at the medium to long-term benefits to society, in addition to looking at what the costs are. And there, along with that come the economic development, in addition to the knowledge transfer that companies like Siemens can offer to Iraqi engineers and technicians.
If I may say, actually, speaking as an economist, when I saw the news of both of your plans, one of the things that struck me was the fact that you were looking at it as an integrated kind of economic development plan. Yep. Both of you made quite considerable input into the gas capture story, which is obviously a huge waste in this country, and so of course completely tally with our thinking as well. I wanted to call on Harry Istepanian, who has a presentation, who will take us through some of the technological, but also the legislative issues that need to be tackled to try to incentivize private sector investment.
Yeah, thank you, Ali. I just wanted to have a quick go through my presentation, because there are quite a few figures that I wanted to show you of the scale of the problem that we have right now. Really, I wanted just to go through quickly what is the public-private partnership and how they can play a role in the electricity sector of Iraq. Really, the model of the participation of the private sector in providing services to the government is not only concerning to reduce the gap between the supply and demand in electricity, but it also is related to the reconstruction work after the war on ISIS. Those are the figures that I wanted to show you. Those came from the Ministry of Planning immediately after the end of the war in June 2017. As you can see, the affected areas, we had 8 power stations we were completely destroyed, and 9 power stations were partially destroyed. And the estimated damage to the electricity sector in 2017 was estimated around 7 billion. This figure came from the World Bank. The damage to the oil sector was around 4.3, so you can see that it's exceeding $11 billion or $12 billion, the damage to the energy sector collectively. This is a graph that I wanted to show you of the scale of the destruction that happened in the affected areas due to the war. You can see the most of the damages were in the distribution sector, substations, followed by transmission, generation, and so on. And also you can see the damage that happened into the networks. So this can give you a brief outlook of the amount of the work that needs to be done in the next 8 years plus. This is the plan that the Ministry of Planning, with the help of the World Bank, came with for the next 8 years. What needs to be done in the first 1 to 3 years, which is basically provide an emergency electricity to those affected areas, add as much as possible power to enable the internally displaced people to get back to their homes. And then in the midterm, you will think about reinforcing your network by adding additional generation and then improve the reliability. But on the long run, this is the plan that the ministry is also planning to do right now, is to reform this sector so we can have a sustainable power to the entire country. This is some figures about the current fiscal budget, for example, to Iraq. One of the ones which I like it very much, and from my experience in the Gulf region, actually we applied it successfully, is what I call it Iraqization in terms of Saudization or Kuwaitization, which means that the private sector will start using as many Iraqis as possible, so at the end, you will end with a model that uses like 90–95% of the local forces, local workforces to operate the private sector. This is a graph that probably some are familiar with it, how much you are going to invest if you are at the government in developing your electricity sector. You can see in the model on the left, this is what we have right now at the ministry, where we can see that there's a huge investment is required at the inception of the projects, and then you have this 25 years of operation and maintenance, fuel costs and everything distributed over 25 years, while in the public-private partnership model, you will see that is nicely distributed over the 25 years of contract you have between the private partner. The important thing that I've seen many investors, when they are coming to Iraq, talking about risk and risk mitigation. Probably some of you are aware of the renewable energy that Iraq is planning to introduce shortly, this year or next year at most. The high LCOEs, and the LCOE in Iraq is at least 4 or 5 times higher than the neighboring countries. And when you come to the investors and you say, why the LCOE is so high in Iraq? immediately they will come and say that the risk is high. And then you will tell them why the risk is high. Then they will come and number it for you and say, well, it's security, for example. They will come, insurance is high. All these kind of things, logistics, infrastructure, all these kind of things, excuses will come to tell you that the LCOE is so high, it doesn't make sense for us to invest in Iraq. And the government will say, well, look, why it is 2.5 in Saudi Arabia, why it is 6, 7, or 10 in Iraq. They will come and say, well, look, I'm going to pay like $1 million for security every month. So that kind of things that the government needs to think about and how to mitigate those risks. Of course, the other one which of course, one of the things that I think when we spoke about tariffs, the important issue is the affordability. We shouldn't forget about affordability. If we are going through this transition from the public sector to the private sector, we should be very careful with the affordability. We shouldn't put this burden on the public consumers to pay for the extra tariffs, while we forget that we need to optimize our costs on the operation and maintenance, for example, efficiency, heat rates, fuel transmission, fuel costs, etc. So those are kind of things that also needs to be included in our economic model. This is one graph, quickly I want to go through it. This is a typical structure that the government can adopt for the P3 models, where they can inject, that doesn't stop the government to inject actually equity into the SPV. They can go with partnership with the bankers or the investors in developing the SPV, and then probably go for IPO at some stage and sell the shares to the public. So those are some of the challenges that I believe are quite important for Iraq to tackle. And the two important things that really are missing in Iraq right now is first the P3 law. There is no law for public-private partnership in Iraq right now in place. And that's very important thing which makes many investors cautious to come to Iraq, because there's no guarantees on the legal side to come and invest in Iraq. And the important things about the PPP law, that it gives clear directions for the investors of how to come in, how to invest in Iraq, and how to develop their projects. The other thing which is important for them is the PPP law will give a good signal to the investors to come. So if you have a law in place, the investor will come. If there's no law, there will be lots of ambiguity about it, and they might create lots of confusion in the future.
Sorry, Harry. There's a couple of things that you mentioned that I'd like to bring the panel in.
I think I'm done.
That's great.
I think I'm done.
Because the panel will shortly end, but I wanted to bring it back to the panel. Sorry. And of course Harry.
I will leave it this to you.
Okay.
I will leave it this to you, except the Beja power station, which was announced yesterday, it's gone now. I think we signed the contract with Siemens about this. But you can see there are lots of potentials for the private sector involvement in developing the electricity sector. think I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Now, one of the areas that Harry mentioned in his presentation was this perception of risk inside of Iraq and a 25-year term, recouping your costs over 25 years. One of the things that we tried to look at was how does that compare to, what if you had an accelerated capital cost recovery? So rather than 25 years, you shorten that span. What does that do to the levelized cost of electricity that Harry mentioned? Now, one of the things is if you benchmark it against neighborhood generators, any option you choose is going to be cheaper. So, Dr. Araji, has there been any discussion on trying to incentivize the investment, bring down the costs, reduce the risk to investors by shortening the capital recovery term of investment?
To begin with, very quickly, I believe there are so many protection means and methods for the investors in Iraq that who are involved with us, they know it really very few where we are at and what's ahead to try to go through this massive, let's say, bureaucracy that we have to clear in front of investors to reach the goals that we have put in timing and responsibility. I would like to talk about three things in reply to your question. Number one, I believe that the bilateral, let's say, contract between the investor and between the government represented by the Ministry of Electricity, whether it will be the power purchase agreement or the main contract between the National Investment Commission, Ministry of Electricity, and the contract and the investor, gives a lot of incentives and set the terms of the return of his investments. It depends on the model that he's presenting. So when he presents a model that he would like to recover on such and such time and would like to have, let's say, the following guarantees, the following support and so on, it's to be written right and that's what we've done to a lot of investors, and that's what we are doing. On the PPP, really, that I would like to say that there has been mixed messages came into us from people in the neighboring, in the region. Some say that you will not, at the minute you write and I for the first time say it in a panel like this, some say the minute you put the PPP law, you will not have the resilience and the capability to try to maneuver, try to give the best you can to the investors in the current circumstances. Therefore, wait and see the experiences of the people in the region and try to give all the assurance and all the capability to the investors in the bilateral agreements that you will have with them. And our good friend and the panelists have said, well, investors would like to know exactly where things are at. Yeah, correct. So we are, for the first time, the government has passed this. It's right on the way to the parliament. I think it will be discussed extensively, the benefits and let's say, disbenefits of having for every little thing, big thing, if you want to change a law, you'll have to go back to the parliament to change. While you have, for example, a new experience that you are moving on and benefiting from, the experiences of others. The third and last point that I would like to put, that I believe the market of Iraq is capable of absorbing let's say, the big capital of investors in the energy region, in the energy sector, whether it be electricity, or it be oil or gas and so on. This has historically been as an energy country, and we have not harnessed the benefits of it. And therefore, I believe that with all the protections that we have given, whether it be in the investment law, whether it will be in the bilateral investment agreement, whether it be in the bilateral treaties that we have with many countries, whether it be bilateral or multilateral, which we have. We are members of so many other treaty organizations that could give a lot of protection, a lot of, let's say, guarantees to the investor to put us much of his capital, and in a guided way, in a cost-benefit analysis and economical, let's say, model, he could recover as much as possible with an ever-developing economy, because the next 10 years we are going to open up in so many sectors, whether it will be in the sectors that I mentioned or the service sector, especially housing and infrastructure, and which would require a lot of electricity and a lot of energy derivatives that you need, because the plan that we have, 2.5 to 3 million housing units to be built, and that's a goal, whether you build it or not, but we are working on that. It needs a lot of electricity, it needs gas, it needs all the infrastructure that is developed with it, whether it be transmission, distribution, whatever it is. So you're talking about an energy country developing, has a robust, let's say, plan to meet the requirements. And I believe that the investors, well, I'm not minimizing any investment scheme, has some difficulties of different, let's say, levels. But I would say, on the whole, I'm optimistic that the investment in Iraq over the next 10 years will be through with companies or countries, and especially between major countries that we are cooperating with, that they could cover a lot of the guarantees to their companies as well as the benefits that we put from our side.
So, speaking as your compatriot, I hope that this vision actually comes true.
Well, I hope so. We are working on it.
Yep. Cognizant of the time we have left, can I give a minute to each of our remaining panelists to give their final thoughts on where they see the future of this participation of the private sector? We'll start with Harry.
Yeah, thank you. As I said, Ali, in the presentation, the most important thing for Iraq now is legislation. This is very important. Unless you have a clean-cut legislations in Iraq that will encourage the investors to come, I think the pace will be very slow. We have to get those legislations drafted, put it in front of the parliament, and get the approval as soon as possible. That's the main thing. The second issue that, as I mentioned in the presentation, is the risk mitigation. We have to work closely, the public sector with the private sector closely, either to mitigate the risk, share the risk, whichever way you can find it, so we can get on and start those projects as soon as possible. There's a lot of work needs to be done, especially in the affected areas right now. Thank you.
Please, Khalid, your final thoughts. Well, that's a good final thought then.
Yes, you need to have legislation that can fit with the targets of the government. I understand that, and I agree with His Excellency that the next 10 years will be, hopefully, inshallah, very prosperous for Iraq. And this requires a lot of work from the government side to put in place the required legislation to encourage investors to come, and also to put the guidelines for how to, legislation not only for investment, but also for the tendering processes, for the evaluation, to ensure transparent procedures for selecting contractors and suppliers, and this will help very much to attract more investment to the country.
Thank you.
I don't have any words of wisdom beyond what Harry has said. I think he encapsulated the issue in a crystal clear fashion. The only thing I would add is that until that day that the legislative environment catches up with the economic requirements of the country and its development requirements, we will continue to do what we do, which is work on rebuilding the infrastructure. accepting the risks that Harry clearly outlined, and those risks, what Harry is talking about is that when you have risk, it means cost, and that gets paid directly out of the state budget. And I mean, nobody here wants to increase risk for the state, but it's also the state's job to minimize it. We try to reduce costs because we see it as being senseless to pay, for example, security costs, but unfortunately we must. Again, we try. It's just a balancing act that we try to master. Thank you.
Thank you. And Bill, last but not least.
Well, on a more cheerful note, I mean, risk is such a gloomy topic. We don't want to leave depressed. I see a brighter future. And I think, you know, I mean, we can spend an hour talk about project bankability, IRR, and so on, but that hasn't really stopped the people in this room from investing and moving. And that's really the only way forward. So, in my perspective, the best way to mitigate risk is the people we have here, whether it's our employees. In the video clip that we flashed, I could have pointed out Rima, who's now part of our project management leadership program. I could have pointed out Adil, who is now installing the substation in the Mosul area. I could have pointed Wafi, who's working with Central Bank, TBI, Ministry of Finance to help with the financing. That's where we need to invest. We can't just stop, lay back and say, too risky, you know, not worth it. So from that perspective, really, I'm more optimistic. It's just a question of maybe a little more patient, but don't stop moving. The Minister, His Excellency, talks about electricity as being mas'uliyya tadamuniya. Roughly translates into electricity is, really to address it, is everyone's problem, or everybody. You know, I'd like to read more the translation of solidarity, of really feeling the country, the needs, the challenges on the ground, and just get down to business and go do it. That's how I see things, and I do see a brighter future for Iraq, inshallah.
Well, those are fantastic words to end with. As everybody here knows, the resilience and the ability of this country to come through things that are difficult is probably unparalleled in the world, and so hopefully some of that tenacity can filter in to the electricity sector and beyond all other parts of the economy. All that's left for me to do is to thank our panelists, His Excellency Dr. Sami Al-Araji, William Wakila, Bill Wakila, Mus'ab Al-Khatib, Khalid Abu Rihab, and Harry Estepanian. Thank you so much. The next item on the agenda is a coffee break, and I feel like it's well deserved at this point. So thank you very much again.